My son ignored me for 12 years until the day he learned I had sold my patent for $28 million. Then he showed up at my new house in Scottsdale with his wife, her parents, and 3 suitcases saying, "Dad, family sticks together when it counts. We're moving in." I smiled, told them to make themselves comfortable, and began doing something I should have done 12 years ago. They never saw it coming. The wire transfer confirmed at 8:47 on a Tuesday morning in March. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my old house in Mesa, drinking black coffee from the same chipped mug I'd used since 1987, watching the numbers appear on my laptop screen. $28,400,000. After federal taxes, capital gains treatment, and Arizona's cut, I would clear just under $18 million. $18 million for a thermal shielding patent I had filed 22 years earlier while working as an aerospace engineer at a defense contractor in Tempe. The buyer was an aerospace components firm out of Houston. They had been licensing the patent for 9 years and finally decided owning it outright made more financial sense than continuing the royalties. My attorney, Carol Reyes, had negotiated hard. I had let her. I understood systems and processes, not negotiation tactics. That was why I hired people who understood things I didn't. I sat with the number for a long time. The coffee went cold. Outside, a mockingbird was going through its entire repertoire in the Palo Verde tree by the fence, cycling through Cardinal, J, Wren, starting over. I had always liked that about mockingbirds. They were persistent without being anxious. 41 years of aerospace engineering had given me a pension, a paid-off house, a reliable Buick, and a comfort with precision that made other people impatient. I knew how systems worked, how tolerances were calculated, how a single flawed specification could compromise an entire assembly. I applied that same thinking to my finances, my schedule, my home, everything in its proper place, every variable accounted for. My wife, Patricia, had died 7 years earlier. Pancreatic cancer, 8 weeks from diagnosis to the end. We had been married 34 years. After she was gone, the house felt like a blueprint without a structure built on it. I kept living in it because selling felt like admitting something I wasn't ready to admit. My son, Marcus, had stopped speaking to me 12 years ago when he was 31. The break had not been sudden. It had been a slow pressure failure, the kind that shows up as a hairline crack before the whole thing gives way. It started with money. Marcus had come to me with a business plan for a bar and restaurant concept he wanted to open with his wife, Tanya, in Phoenix. They needed $60,000 for the build-out. I had $41,000 in savings at the time. I offered it freely, told him it was a gift, no repayment required. Marcus looked at the number like I had handed him a parking ticket instead of a check. 41,000? Tanya's parents are putting in 80. You're saying my side of the family contributes less than half of what her parents can manage? I told him I was giving him everything I had. He said that was the problem. He said I had worked for a defense contractor for 3 decades and had nothing to show for it. He said some things about ambition and priorities that I am not going to repeat here because they were said in anger, and anger makes people cruel in ways they sometimes regret. The restaurant opened without my $41,000. I never found out whether Tanya's parents had actually contributed $80,000 or whether Marcus had simply said that to make my savings feel inadequate. It didn't matter. The calls slowed and then stopped. Birthday cards from his end ceased after year 2. I sent cards every year regardless to their house, to whatever address I could verify. I never knew whether he read them. I assumed not. 12 years is a long time to carry something like that. You learn to set it down without putting it away entirely. Patricia used to say I was better at processing grief than most men because I treated it like an engineering problem. Define the parameters. Accept the constraints. Work within what is actually possible. She wasn't wrong, but she also knew when I was using that frame to avoid feeling something rather than to understand it. The news about the patent sale did not stay private. It couldn't. There had been a press release from the Houston firm. Industry publications picked it up. The Arizona Republic ran a brief item about a local retired engineer completing a significant IP transaction. My name, my background, the general scale of the sale. Enough. I found out how Marcus learned my new address the following way. I had moved to Scottsdale 3 weeks after the sale closed, buying a house on a quiet street near the McDowell-Sonoran Preserve. The realtor had listed my purchase in the county records, which are public. My name was in those records. Anyone looking would find it in an afternoon. Marcus was looking. I had been in the Scottsdale house for 11 days when the doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage, organizing my engineering reference books into the new shelving I had installed that morning. Precision required proper storage. I came through the side door into the entry hall and looked through the sidelight window before opening. Marcus stood on the front step. He was 43 now, heavier than I remembered, with a short beard that had some gray in it. Behind him, Tanya stood with her arms crossed, in a way that looked like impatience, dressed as patience. Behind Tanya, two people I recognized as her parents, Gerald and Rosemary, stood near the sidewalk. 4 large rolling suitcases were arranged on my front walkway with the precision of people who had planned this approach carefully. I stood at the window for a moment. I was 69 years old, and I had not heard my son's voice in 8 years. The last time we had spoken was a phone call that lasted 4 minutes and ended without resolution. I had continued sending the birthday cards anyway, not because I expected a response, because it was the right thing to do. I opened the door. Dad. Marcus used the word the way some people use a key in an unfamiliar lock, pressing harder than necessary, hoping it will catch. Hey, it's been too long. He opened his arms. I stepped forward and let him embrace me because regardless of everything else, he was my son, and I had not stopped loving him when he stopped calling. That is not how love works. Not when you've held someone on the day they were born and felt the whole weight of your future change in one moment. We're so proud of you, Tanya said, moving forward before I could say anything. The patent sale. What an incredible achievement. This is long overdue recognition for your work. Her parents were already moving toward the door with a familiarity that suggested they had rehearsed this entrance. Rosemary smiled at me with the particular warmth of someone who has been told to be warm. Gerald was already looking past me into the house. Marcus gestured at the suitcases. We figured we'd come help you get settled in the new place. It's a lot of house for one person. We're here for you, Dad. There it was. We're here for you. 5 words that meant their exact opposite. I said that I appreciated them making the trip and that I would get them some water, and I stepped back from the door. They came inside. Gerald and Rosemary moved through my entry hall with the slow deliberation of people calculating square footage. Tanya made comments about the paint color and the lighting fixtures with the authority of someone planning renovations. Marcus followed me to the kitchen and stood against the counter while I ran glasses of water. The company offered fair value for the patent, I said, before he could steer the conversation there himself. It was a standard IP transaction. Marcus nodded slowly. Still, 28 million. He let the number sit between us. That's life-changing money, Dad. I mean, the family could really benefit from that kind of resources properly managed. I handed him the water glass. I have an advisor managing it. Carol Reyes referred me to a financial planner. It's all being handled. He set the glass down without drinking from it. Tanya's parents and I have been talking. Gerald has some experience in real estate investment, commercial properties in the Phoenix metro. You put a few million into the right deals, you're looking at serious returns. Gerald has been in commercial real estate, I said. Semi-retired. He knows the market. I told Marcus I would think about it. I said I needed to finish unpacking and suggested we order dinner. He relaxed slightly, interpreting my non-refusal as something closer to agreement than it was. That is a pattern I had noticed in him since childhood. He heard what he wanted to hear in the spaces between what was actually said. That evening, while Tanya's parents settled into the larger guest room and Marcus and Tanya took the second, I excused myself to my study, locked the door, opened my laptop, and searched for estate planning attorneys in Scottsdale, Arizona. The first name that came up with consistent 5-star reviews was a firm called Harwell and Patel. I sent an email that night requesting the earliest available consultation. I noted that it was time-sensitive. I received a response before 7 a.m. the next morning. David Patel could see me at 10 o'clock Monday. I told Marcus and Tanya I had a meeting with my financial planner Monday morning. They didn't question it. Tanya was already measuring the kitchen windows for curtains she had decided needed replacing. David Patel was a compact, methodical man in his late 40s who listened without interrupting. He had the particular stillness of someone who has heard a great many family situations and has learned that patience at the beginning saves considerable time later. I laid out the facts. The patent sale, the arrival, the suitcases, Gerald's real estate pitch, offered within 18 hours of their appearance. He nodded when I finished. Arizona follows the common law principle for estates. You have complete testamentary freedom, no legal obligation to leave anything to an adult child. He opened a folder on his desk and slid a single page across to me. This is a basic framework for an asset protection structure. Trusts, designated beneficiaries, explicit language, clean and bulletproof. What about contesting? He tapped the page. Explicit disinheritance language plus documented evidence of estrangement makes a contest extremely difficult. 12 years of no contact is a matter of record. The birthday cards you sent and never received responses to can be documented. I had kept every returned card, filed in chronological order in a box in my storage room. I told him this. He smiled for the first time. That's useful. We spent 2 hours on the structure. My estate would be divided. 60% to the Scottsdale Veterans Resource Center, 30% to the Arizona Children's Hospital Foundation, 10% to a scholarship fund at my former high school in Tucson. Marcus would receive a certified letter explaining the structure and a nominal sum of $1, listed by name to prevent any claim of accidental omission. I had one other request. I needed someone to do a financial background check. Discreet, thorough. Patel handed me a business card. Thomas Wiley. Former FBI financial crimes. Does private work now. Reasonable rates. Tells you exactly what he finds and nothing more. I called Wiley from the parking garage. Over the following days, I returned to the house each evening and observed. Marcus and Tanya had unpacked fully. Their bathroom products occupied the guest bathroom counter. Rosemary had reorganized my kitchen cabinets without asking, moving things she found illogical. Gerald had set up a temporary workspace in my dining room with papers and a laptop, as if the room were his. My house had become their house in a matter of days, the way water becomes ice when conditions are right, gradually and then all at once. Gerald presented his real estate proposal on Wednesday evening after dinner. He had printed a 12-page packet, bound with a plastic spine. I turned each page at a steady pace while he talked. Commercial mixed-use development in Chandler. Projected returns of 18 to 22% over 5 years. Minimum investment $2 million. I set the packet on the table. I'll need time to review it with my advisor, I said. My voice was level. Of course. Gerald nodded with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in a way that stayed. Take your time. Thursday, Thomas Wiley called. Can we meet? There's quite a bit here. I told Marcus I had a follow-up with the financial planner. He nodded and went back to his phone. I met Wiley at a coffee shop in Old Town Scottsdale. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 60s, with the kind of face that had learned not to react to things. He slid a folder across the table. I'll give you the summary first. He folded his hands. Your son and daughter-in-law are carrying combined debt of approximately $93,000. 3 credit cards maxed. A personal loan at 14% interest. 2 months behind on their mortgage. Chandler property. 4 bedrooms. Purchase price $440. Current equity negative because of a HELOC they took out 18 months ago. He paused. Gerald and Rosemary Kurtz. Similar picture. Retired on paper but cash poor. The commercial real estate portfolio Gerald describes had 3 properties. 2 sold at a loss in 2021. The third is under a short sale agreement. There is no active portfolio. The Chandler development he's pitching you doesn't exist as a registered entity. I searched every Arizona business registry. It's a concept document he made for you. I looked at the folder in my hands. The pages had the particular weight of things that needed to be held, but could not be unfelt. They had nowhere else to go. I said, mostly to myself. Wiley nodded. The timeline fits. The patent sale news went public March 11th. Marcus found your address through county records by March 14th. They were at your door by March 22nd. He paused. That's not a son coming home. That's a creditor identifying an asset. I thanked him, paid him, and drove back to Scottsdale. That evening I sat in my locked study with an engineering notebook open in front of me. I had used these notebooks for 41 years. Graph paper, hardcover, the pages numbered and dated. I began writing in the same block print I had used since graduate school. Names, dates, statements, requests. The Thursday morning conversation with Gerald and every number he had quoted. The curtain measurements Tanya had taken. The kitchen reorganization I had not authorized. I wrote it all down. Evidence collection was second nature to an engineer. You documented everything not because you expected to need it, but because you might. Through the study door, I could hear them in the living room. Gerald's voice, telling a story about a deal in Tempe in 2018 that had made him serious money. Rosemary laughing in a way that sounded designed rather than felt. Tanya telling Marcus something in a lower register that I couldn't make out. I opened a new page in the notebook and wrote at the top, Phase 2. I had already thought through the approach. 41 years of engineering had taught me that the best interventions were elegant, minimum force, maximum precision. You didn't redesign an entire system when a single calibrated adjustment would correct the failure. I needed two things: documented evidence of their true intentions, and a public context in which those intentions could not be reframed. I had the first. I was going to build the second. The next morning at breakfast, I told them I was being recognized at the Arizona Aerospace and Engineering Legacy Dinner in 2 months. A regional industry event, 500 attendees, local media coverage. I had been asked to make a brief speech and to announce my philanthropic commitments publicly. I said I would like my family there for the announcement. Marcus looked up from his coffee. Announcement? I've been working with Patel's office to finalize my estate and charitable giving structure. I'm going to announce the beneficiaries publicly at the dinner. It's important to me that these commitments are made openly. The shift in the room was subtle but unmistakable. Tanya's posture changed. Marcus set down his fork. Gerald made brief eye contact with Rosemary. You're announcing your will publicly, Marcus said carefully. The broad framework. Yes. I kept my tone warm. I want the organizations to know they have my support, and I want family present when I make that commitment. These are significant decisions. You should be there. Marcus nodded slowly. Absolutely, Dad. We wouldn't miss it. After breakfast, I walked to the garage and stood among my engineering reference books for a while. The mockingbird from my old Mesa yard had apparently followed me to Scottsdale, or there was a different one here, which was entirely possible. It was working through its repertoire in the Ocotillo by the wall. Cardinal, Jay, Wren. I went back inside and called Carol Reyes to ask whether she knew anyone doing work with the Veterans Resource Center. As it happened, she was on their advisory board. The following 6 weeks had a particular texture. I was present in the house, but not available in the ways they expected. I had morning coffee on the back patio before they woke. I spent afternoons at the Veterans Resource Center or at Children's Hospital, meeting staff, learning the work, understanding how the money I intended to give them would actually be used. I attended a scholarship committee meeting at my high school alma mater in Tucson, drove down on a Thursday, and back the same evening. When Gerald brought up the Chandler development again, I told him I had consulted my advisor and it wasn't the right fit for my portfolio structure. He pressed. I smiled and said I appreciated the thought and moved on. He was not accustomed to polite refusals that didn't open into negotiation. He tried twice more over the following 2 weeks. Both times I gave him the same response in the same tone. Marcus tried a different approach. He came to my study one evening, knocked, waited for me to open the door. He sat in the chair across from my desk with the posture of someone who had practiced what they were about to say. Dad, I know I owe you an apology for the years we lost. He said it looking at the floor, then up at me. The restaurant didn't work out the way we planned. We made a lot of mistakes. I should have stayed in contact regardless of what happened between us. I'm sorry for that. I listened to every word. I had been an engineer for 41 years. I knew what a structural load test looked like. He was applying weight to the relationship, checking whether it would hold. I told him I appreciated hearing that, and that the lost years had been painful. I told him I hoped we could build something honest going forward. I watched his face process my response. He was looking for the opening, the place where forgiveness became financial access. I didn't give him one. After he left, I sat with what I was feeling, which was grief mostly, not anger. Not satisfaction, just the particular grief of seeing your child clearly for what they have become and knowing that the distance between who they are and who you had hoped they would be is not something you can engineer your way across. I had loved Marcus from the moment they put him in my arms in that hospital in 1980, and I would love him until I stopped existing. That was not the question. The question was whether love required me to hand over my savings and my autonomy and my dignity to prove it. The answer to that question I had settled a long time ago, quietly and alone, in the house in Mesa after Patricia died. The dinner was held at the Arizona Grand Resort on a Friday evening in late May. 512 registered guests, aerospace industry veterans, community leaders, major donors, local government officials, 3 television news crews. The event coordinator had asked me to keep my speech to 8 minutes. I had prepared 12. I spent the week before the dinner in David Patel's conference room reviewing the documentation Thomas Wiley had assembled. We went through everything. The fabricated development proposal, the debt totals, the timeline of Marcus's arrival relative to the patent sale news, recorded conversations from my home, all legal under Arizona's one-party consent statute, which I had confirmed with Patel before I began recording anything. I had placed a small recording device in the living room bookcase between 2 copies of the same aerospace engineering handbook, which I had specifically bought 2 copies of for this purpose. I had placed a second device in the kitchen. I had recorded 17 conversations over 6 weeks. Some of what I recorded was mundane. Some of it was not. Gerald, to Rosemary, in the kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon. The development pitch isn't landing. We need the boy to work on him differently. Maybe the emotional angle. Tanya, to Marcus, in the hallway near the guest room. He's not as soft as you made him sound. He keeps saying he'll think about it. What does that mean? Marcus, to Tanya, later the same night. It means I need more time. He's lonely. That's the angle. He doesn't want to die alone. I keep showing up, being the son he wants. Eventually, he restructures the estate. I had transferred every recording to an encrypted drive and given a copy to Patel. I had brought the drive with me to the dinner in my jacket pocket. Marcus and Tanya arrived in formal wear. Tanya wore a green dress and the pearl earrings she had bought herself the previous week at a Scottsdale boutique using a credit card I had not authorized. Marcus wore a dark suit. Gerald and Rosemary sat with them at a table near the front. They had positioned themselves where they would be visible in any photos taken during my speech. Dinner was served. The industry president gave remarks about the history of Arizona's aerospace contributions. 3 awards were presented. Then the introduction. Harold, the president said, has spent 41 years contributing to systems that protect the lives of people he will never meet. His patent for thermal shielding technology has been integrated into components across multiple defense and commercial applications. Tonight, he joins us not only as an honored engineer, but as a member of this community who has chosen to direct his resources toward lasting good. I walked to the podium. The room was attentive. Marcus and Tanya were watching me with expressions they had calibrated for this moment. Proud, supportive, present. I thanked the industry association. I spoke about Patricia and what 41 years of shared work meant. I spoke about the veterans I had spent the past 6 weeks getting to know at the resource center, and the children at the hospital, and the young people from my high school in Tucson who were working their way through degrees that might not have been possible without financial support. And then I said, I also want to talk about family. Because my son Marcus came home recently after 12 years, and his return helped me understand something clearly. I clicked the remote. The first audio clip played through the ballroom speakers. Marcus's voice was unmistakable. He's lonely. That's the angle. He doesn't want to die alone. I keep showing up, being the son he wants. Eventually, he restructures the estate. The room went still in the particular way. Rooms go still when something true and ugly has just entered them. I clicked again. Gerald's voice. The development pitch isn't landing. We need the boy to work on him differently. Maybe the emotional angle. One more, Tanya's voice. He's not as soft as you made him sound. What does that mean? Followed by Marcus. It means I need more time. I looked up from the podium. Marcus had gone white. Tanya was gripping the edge of the table. Gerald had the fixed expression of a man calculating whether to stay or leave. 12 years ago, I said, my son told me that my savings were inadequate, that my career was a disappointment, and that I had nothing to show for my life. Then he stopped speaking to me. 8 days after the patent sale became public, he found my address and arrived with 4 suitcases, a fabricated investment proposal, and a plan to secure access to my estate by performing the role of the son I had always wanted. I let that sit for a moment. Tonight, I am announcing that my estate will be distributed as follows: 60% to the Arizona Veterans Resource Center, 30% to the Arizona Children's Hospital Foundation, 10% to the Harold G. Mason Scholarship Fund at Rincon High School in Tucson. I paused. My son Marcus is explicitly named in my estate documents. He receives $1. Not because I forgot him, because I chose this deliberately. I want that on record. The applause started near the back and moved forward. Several of the veterans I had come to know at the resource center were on their feet. A woman from the scholarship committee was crying. A news camera moved closer. Marcus was already standing. His voice cut across the applause. That's out of context. You had no right to record us privately. Arizona is a one-party consent state, I said into the microphone. I was present for every conversation. Every recording is completely legal. Context doesn't improve your words, Marcus. It only clarifies them. 2 security staff moved toward their table with the quiet efficiency of people who are very good at what they do. Tanya grabbed her purse. Gerald was already standing. Marcus turned in the doorway, pointing. You'll regret this. We're family. You owe me. I looked at him across the length of that room, past 500 people, past the cameras, past 12 years. I owed you love when you were growing up. I gave that. I owed you honesty when you came back. I gave that too, tonight. We're settled. The doors closed. The applause in the room didn't stop for a long time. The legal response came 9 days later. Marcus and Tanya had retained a firm in Phoenix. The complaint alleged defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and invasion of privacy. They were seeking $3 million in damages. Patel called me at 7 a.m. I read the filing before breakfast. I told him to proceed. The preliminary hearing was in July before Judge Angela Reyes, no relation to my attorney, Carol. Judge Reyes had a reputation for precision and impatience with cases that wasted her time. She had reviewed the evidence package Patel submitted before the hearing. Their attorney, a man named Bradford who wore expensive shoes and a look of permanent mild grievance, argued that I had deceived my family into providing statements under false pretenses, that the public presentation had been designed to humiliate rather than inform, and that the recordings, while technically legal, had been obtained through manipulation. Patel's response was brief. Every statement Mr. Bradford characterizes as humiliating was made voluntarily by his clients in a private residence legally occupied by Mr. Mason, who was present for, or the subject of each conversation. Truth is an absolute defense to defamation in Arizona. The financial documentation establishes that the plaintiffs arrived at Mr. Mason's home in direct response to his patent sale becoming public, bringing a fabricated investment proposal and a stated strategy of exploiting his loneliness to access his estate. Mr. Mason had every right to make that factual record public in whatever forum he chose. Judge Reyes looked at Bradford over her reading glasses. Counselor, on what theory does your client expect relief when the sole contested statements are recordings of your client's own voice? Bradford adjusted his expensive shoes. The method of collection, Your Honor, and the context in which the recordings are legal, Judge Reyes said. The statements are your client's own words. The financial documentation has been authenticated. She closed the folder in front of her. Dismissed with prejudice. Patel, file for sanctions under Arizona's anti-SLAPP provisions. I'll hear that motion. Outside the courthouse, a reporter from Channel 12 asked how I felt. I told her I felt finished. Not victorious. Not vindicated. Those words implied that the outcome had been in question. The outcome had never been in question. I had been an engineer. I understood tolerances. I had built this structure to spec, and it had held. Thomas Wiley had sent a brief update the previous week. Marcus and Tanya had vacated the Scottsdale house 2 days after the dinner, while I was still at the hotel. They had taken everything they had brought, and nothing that was mine, which told me someone, possibly Bradford, had advised them to keep it clean. They had driven back to Chandler. Their mortgage servicer had filed a notice of default. Gerald and Rosemary had returned to their home in Surprise, Arizona. The short sale on their remaining commercial property had completed. Wiley didn't say much beyond the facts. He never did. That was what I paid him for. I came home to a house that was mine again. The kitchen cabinets were reorganized in someone else's logic, but that took me an afternoon to correct. I moved everything back to where I had originally placed it, methodically, starting with the mugs and working left to right across the shelves. A neighbor came by that evening, a retired civil engineer named Don Sprague, who lived 3 houses down and had introduced himself the week I moved in. He brought a 6-pack of a local IPA and said he had seen the coverage and thought I might want company that wasn't asking me anything. We sat on the back patio until it was dark. He told me about a bridge project he had worked on in the 80s that had required 12 iterations of the load specification before they got it right. I told him about a thermal cycling test that had failed at 48 hours and taken 3 weeks to diagnose. We talked about the engineering process, the way people who love a craft talk about it, without performing the love, just living inside it for a while. Before he left, he said, "My daughter and I went 2 years without speaking when she was in her 30s. We got through it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Neither outcome makes you a bad father or a bad engineer." I told him I appreciated that. After he left, I stood in the kitchen with the last of the IPA going warm in my hand, looking out at the Ocotillo by the back wall. The mockingbird was still working through its repertoire out there somewhere in the dark, persistent and patient, and indifferent to whether anyone was listening. The letter came on a Thursday in August, 6 weeks after the courthouse. Plain white envelope, Phoenix postmark, handwriting I recognized as Marcus's, from 20 years of birthday cards that had traveled only in one direction. I held it for 2 days before opening it. Not because I was afraid of what it said, because I understood that, once I read it, I would have to decide what to do with whatever it contained, and I wanted to be certain before I opened it that I was deciding from clarity rather than hope. I opened it on a Saturday morning with coffee on the back patio, the preserve visible above the roofline to the north, the early light doing its best work on the saguaros. There were 4 pages. His handwriting was careful in the way. Handwriting is careful when someone has drafted something multiple times and finally committed to a version they can live with. "Dad," he wrote, "I'm not writing to ask for anything. I want to say that plainly at the start because I know that every time I've come to you with words, there was something underneath them I wanted. And I know you always knew that, even when I didn't. I think I've always known you were smarter than I gave you credit for. I think I didn't give you credit for much at all. I'm not going to explain the restaurant or what happened 12 years ago in ways that make me the reasonable party. I said what I said. I called your savings inadequate and your career a disappointment, and the reason I said those things is that Tanya's parents had been in my ear about ambition and success and what a real provider looked like, and I was 21 years into trying to be what they thought I should be, instead of who I actually was. That doesn't excuse it. I'm not offering it as an excuse. I'm offering it as the honest account of why I became someone who would say those things to his father. Coming back when the sale went public was Tanya's idea first, but I agreed to it. I want to be precise about that. I agreed to it. I knew what we were doing. I told myself a story about how it was also a real reconnection, that the money was just the occasion and the relationship was the point. But you played me that recording in that ballroom, and I heard myself say exactly what we were actually doing. I keep showing up, being the son he wants. Eventually he restructures the estate. That's what I said. In your house, in the dark, when I thought you were asleep. You heard me say that. So did 500 people. I've been thinking about what it takes to say something like that about your own father. Tanya and I have separated. I don't know if it's permanent yet. I've been staying in a spare room at a friend's place in Tempe. I'm working again. IT consulting. Slow but enough. The mortgage situation is bad but manageable if I can keep the current contract. I'm not telling you any of this to generate sympathy. I'm telling you because I think you deserve an honest account of where things actually are, since you've been getting the performance version for years. I don't expect a response. I don't expect you to change anything. The dollar in your will is honestly more than fair. It's more than what I gave you, which was silence and contempt. You documented everything, built your case, made it public, won in court, and you did all of it without saying one thing that wasn't true. I know enough about you to understand how much that precision mattered to you. I think I understand you better at 43 than I did at 31. I'm not sure that understanding arrived in time to matter. Mom used to say you were the most patient man she'd ever known. Not passive, patient. You would wait for the right moment with the same focus you brought to everything else. I think I always read that as coldness. I don't read it that way now. I hope the Veterans Program does good work. I hope the kids from Rincon get what they need. I hope the engineering scholarship puts someone in a lab somewhere who finds something worth finding. I hope you're okay, Dad. Marcus. I folded the letter and held it for a while. The mockingbird was in the Palo Verde again, running through its repertoire. I wondered if it was the same bird from Mesa, or just the same impulse distributed across the species, this drive to collect and reproduce every voice it had ever heard, to keep the catalog current, to never stop adding to what it knew. I put the letter in my desk drawer, not in the trash and not in a file. The drawer felt like the right place. Present, but not answered. Preserved, but not acted on. Some doors stay closed even when you understand why they were locked. Others you leave in a state of considered uncertainty. Not open, not sealed, just held. Carol Reyes called that afternoon to say the Veterans Resource Center wanted to name their new job training wing after me. I told her I was uncomfortable with that. She said sometimes what you're comfortable with is less relevant than what the community needs, which is to understand that individual generosity can change institutional capacity and that naming things makes that visible. I told her I would think about it. Don Sprague knocked on the door that evening with a problem he was having with his irrigation system's pressure regulation, and we spent an hour in his front yard with a pressure gauge and a set of adjustable wrenches, diagnosing the system in a methodical sequence until we found the faulty valve, replaced it with one from his garage shelf, and watched the drip emitters across his desert landscaping return to their proper flow rate. Standing back and watching a system work the way it was designed to work, quietly and without drama, doing its job that has always been the part of engineering that felt closest to what other people call happiness. I drove home as the sun was going down behind the White Tank Mountains to the west, the sky doing what Arizona skies do at that hour, a performance so regular and so magnificent that you never fully account for it regardless of how many years you've watched it. I pulled into my garage, sat in the Buick for a moment with the engine off. My son was in Tempe, in a borrowed room, putting his life back together one honest day at a time. My estate was structured, documented, and in the care of people who knew what they were doing. The organizations I had chosen to support were planning programs and facilities and scholarships that would outlast me by decades. The house was mine, the evenings were mine, the work was mine. That was enough, more than I had expected, less than I had imagined, which is, in my experience, usually how the good things come. I went inside and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Marcus's letter in front of me, not to read it again, but just because setting it on the table felt like acknowledging that it existed, that the story it represented had not yet arrived at its final configuration, that there might be more variables to account for before the tolerances were fully established. The mockingbird was in the Ocotillo by the back wall, still at it, still adding to its catalog, still getting the notes right. I listened for a while,